I sort of learned what really works in this franchise, and I could create characters that service that. When you look at her, you just see this intelligence behind the eyes. Well, he likes Rebecca's apple pie. He respects her and she can really cook. This season ending is my biggest one.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Heart in Motion podcast. I'm so excited to welcome back to the podcast Alfonso Moreno. How are you doing, Alfonso?
Great. Thank you for having me.
So excited to, first of all, so excited to find out that you were the showrunner for Hope Valley 1874. We're two, three episodes in now, depending on when people catch this podcast. And man, the buzz is just crazy with excitement. First of all, people that are familiar with When Calls the Heart will say often that you are a fan favorite showrunner. We love what we saw with When Calls the Heart in seasons 5, 6, and 7. So to find out that you were kind of the creator and just like spearheading this project for Hope Valley 1874 was super exciting for us. So I'm so excited to talk to you about it.
Thank you. I'm very excited to talk about it. I love this show. I'm having a lot of fun with it.
So, you are showrunner for When Calls the Heart for those three seasons. So, you know a little bit or a lot about Hope Valley. When you guys land on the idea to take this prequel back to 1874, what are some of those things that you had to research to make it relevant for that time period, but also make sure that it was relevant and leading us to When Calls the Heart 1910 and on?
One thing that really interested me about the year 1874 is that was the year the Mounties were created. And to me, the theme of Mounties and One Calls the Heart go hand in hand. So like it would be great that to start it then, right at the beginning
Yep.
of that. And the research that I most of the research that we went into was most of the prospectors and what would go on with that, because those are things I wasn't aware of. So I needed to just sort of become familiar with it. And then I just, I already sort of knew what When Calls the Heart was about, and it was, mostly about community. So I just wanted to create a time when, like, what's the DNA of this community? And so to me, you go back to the beginning of when there was no town, no settlement, and what started the whole sort of mindset of community for this, what would become Hope Valley in the future.
Got it. So you do come into When Calls the Heart in season 5. So there's been a lot of groundwork that's been laid before, and I imagine you had to kind of learn where has this story came to where it is now as a showrunner. But being the, like the creator of this project and the showrunner season 1, what freedoms did that afford you that maybe you didn't have as a showrunner in the middle of, several seasons of a project like When Calls the Heart?
The big advantage is, one is I sort of learned uh, what what really works in this franchise, and I could create characters that service that. Uh, but it's also just a joy to create new characters in a new world, right? But knowing that the tone is going to be similar but different, right? It's going to be so it's creating the dynamics between characters and relationships um, that I think will carry on. I mean, one example I have is that when I started One Calls the Heart, Henry Gowan was sort of, I felt like a bad guy, right? So, I wanted to, and it allowed me to humanize him. What I did in my first few seasons there is I was able to humanize him. But what made that work was because he was such a bad guy, right? That
Yeah.
the redemption quality of One Calls the Heart. I think that's another important element, and that's an element that I feel it's not just community, but it's also redemption.
Yeah.
And I've put in this story, in this series, the seeds of that, where some of our characters are going to have need some redemption, and that some of the characters, some of that our audience doesn't know yet because you haven't seen the storylines play out, but you'll see an element of that.
Awesome. That's so good to know. So we know also that Beth Stewart, that she joined When Calls the Heart the same year you did. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And
Yeah.
she is
So,
also writing for Hope Valley 1874. So, what made her the right fit to work on this project with you? And like, what are some of her strengths that she brings to this project?
one reason I really wanted her was because we work well together, right? When working together for the 3 seasons, there was a real comfort level. And when you're starting out a new series, a new writer's room, it was it really gave me a true comfort level to have her there, someone who, I know and I trust, and who knows this franchise, who knows some of the, a lot of the history of, all our characters from One Calls the Heart, and how, whenever we want to plant and, some kind of storyline that refers to these Easter eggs, as they say, that these storylines that refer back. She was
Yeah.
very helpful in that. So it was mostly, a comfort level. I really liked her writing, and and yeah, I think those are the main things that she brings. Always in a writer's room, it's not just how well do you write, but how well do you work together? How well do you mesh? How well are you in the room and pitching ideas? So all that came into play.
And so are there 8 episodes this season for Hope Valley 1874, right?
That's
Did the
correct.
two of you write all of those 8 episodes?
No,
Was there anybody
I
else?
wrote, we had a writer's room of a few writers. I wrote 4, Beth wrote 2, and then my other writers wrote the other 2.
Okay, so more than just the two of you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Good little writer's room. That's awesome. All right, so you also brought in some familiar directors for this first season. All 3 directors who even directed this season of When Calls the Heart. So, what was that like bringing in Alysse Leite-Rogers, Martin Wood, Mike Rohl, all familiar with When Calls the Heart? Talk about the choices to bring those directors in.
Well, I had worked a lot with Mike Rohl and Martin Wood in On When Calls the Heart, and then and I even brought Mike Rohl in to direct the first block of When Hope Calls. Uh, so I have a long history with both of them, and we needed other directors, and I trust the production team at When Calls the Heart. So Elise came very highly recommended. I talked to her, met with her, and I just had an immediate comfort level with her, and it turned out great. I thought she was fantastic. I think her episodes really look great.
That's awesome to hear. Yeah, she's brought some really interesting, fresh perspectives to the episodes that she's directed on When Calls the Heart. So it's been fun to
Yeah.
watch her work. So we're excited to see what she brings to Hope Valley 1874 as well.
I told that in her style, I thought it was really lyrical. A lot of her shot selections, I thought were interesting.
That's such a good word for that. She directed the episode with Nathan and Elizabeth last year on the horseback that is now part of the intro for When Calls the Heart. And so that stunning shot is something that
Mhm.
she captured and is a favorite for us to see. So, yeah. All right. So on set, what we see on screen often looks very different from reality. So, what can you change about Jamestown and what can you not touch when it comes to working in that specific space?
Well, we changed a lot. We didn't shoot much of as you when you watch a show. I don't think it looked too familiar. We
Mainstream.
changed the church into the ranch house, but we built a whole new trading post. We built sort of a facade of the boarding house, brand new. But then we use the interior of the saloon and I think you can when you watch it, it's not a big surprise that you do see it, and that's the intent. The intent is that and we built it geographically so that the exterior of the boarding house and the exterior of the trading post, when you look at it, will match pretty precisely of where the mercantile and the saloon are, because these buildings are the future buildings of that. So those two buildings are the first two buildings of what would become Hope Valley, and they're shot sort of in a different part of Jamestown, those two exteriors, but they sort of match geographically. So we use the interior of the saloon. We use the interior of the barn, which they use at and calls the Heart.
Mhm.
And we created this uh, blacksmith shop that's a standing in Jamestown, but you rarely see it. And I'm not sure you ever see it. So that becomes a bigger set that we have. So those are the only things that we see. Oh, and then we have the uh, the house that it belongs to. Uh, Rosemary and Lee are the house that our Peggy and Nash characters live in. So we changed that.
Got it.
So those are the only
Okay.
sets, and everything else is sort of different.
So at the end of season, when you build something up like that, do you have to take it down, given that, When Calls the Heart is going to come in and film behind you?
We have to take down we have to convert it back to the church, and we have to convert the saloon back to what it is. But the exteriors of the interior and the exterior of the trading post and the exterior of the boarding house will remain standing, because One Calls the Heart it's in a different part of Jamestown,
Different
and One
spot.
Calls the Heart doesn't use it. We're going to wrap it up and preserve it for,
Nice.
the following season, so it doesn't get too damaged by the weather.
Got it. Okay, that's cool.
But it's going to stay
So
standing, but it's just going to be nice, preserved by
it'll
some
be
wrapping.
interesting to see during the Hardy's family reunion if they let anybody get a shot of that or not. Who knows?
I would imagine, I'm not in charge of that, but I would imagine they would.
Yeah.
It's
So
right
they
there.
we've already seen some scenes that are clearly not Jamestown. So what were some of those things that we were like, well, these are the types of scenes we need to create, and we're going to have to go elsewhere to create those scenes. You guys had to find
Yeah,
another location to shoot.
we found the big location that we had to find, and it took a lot of effort, surprisingly, was the prospectors camp. Part of the prospectors camp is shot in Jamestown, and part of it, and I think it's pretty obvious which part isn't shot in Jamestown. It's a beautiful water river, right? That's such a beautiful location. It's a national park there or a park there in Vancouver. But what made you'd think that Vancouver has a lot of rivers, but what made that location really difficult to find is that in episode one, we have the wagon, they sort of take off, right, with the little girl and with Sarah in it, and he has to go save her. That we needed that kind of runway near a
Got it.
river where we have a wagon, and that was the only place we could find to have that runway. Every other river stream there was the bank was too close, or the rock was too rocky, so
Yeah.
it came down to that one location. But
Got it.
and then that park has other woods in it. And so we filmed some of our wood scenes in Jamestown and some at that park. And it does add a lot of beauty to our shot. And it gives us, I think it gives a really good production value and scope to this series of seeing
Yeah.
those kind of beauty shots.
So you shoot in blocks. Does that mean you're going back and forth within a block between those two locations, or did you try to shoot everything at that one location at one time?
We would we'd end the block on at that location, and we begin the next block at that location, so we don't have to move, right? So
Got it.
it's
Okay. All right. So you mentioned Easter eggs. I'm curious, like we've already seen a little bit of an Easter egg by introducing Ned Yost in episode one. How did you come up with the idea of like how often you're going to drop in an Easter egg just to kind of keep Hardy's, guessing what was next? Is it just like, okay, when it fit the story, we're going to go ahead and add it in, or did you already kind of have those Easter eggs in your mind?
the for the most part, it's just when it fits the story we would do it. So in the writers' room we talk about it, and we know the characters of One Calls Heart, so we would sort of, hey, this would fit. Um, the and then we had planned for the season finale to have a big there's going to be some more Easter eggs. So, but not many, but some are going to be kind of big.
Got it. Okay. And so you wrote there's going to be a baby in episode one. Let's make it Ned, or how can we get Ned into episode one?
There's going to be a baby. Let's make it Ned. And what happens is, you know, because I've seen all the episodes of Uncastle Heart, and from the very beginning, when you watch the series, a lot of those people were transplants, right? Elizabeth is transplant. Jack Wagner's character is a transplant, and I what season six is in a sort of an anomaly because it got re-edited, but my sense was that it may be only because I wrote an episode that got changed, but that Abigail was a transplant. At least at one point we were thinking that. I'm not sure if it ever on came out in an episode, but in her backstory, we had made her a back. So, a lot of the main characters are transplants, so that you're dealing with only a few of the people who might have been there, right?
Yeah.
So those are the we were limited to.
But how fun
And
is
then if you
that?
have a character like, and then if you have a character like Florence, well, Florence's last name would be different, right? So even if you planted an Easter egg,
Yeah.
you wouldn't even know that was, it has to be something that would be identifiable.
Yeah. And how much fun is that those are unanswered things that we don't know. And so you get the fun part of actually dreaming that
Yeah.
up. So that's got to be
Yeah.
fun. All right. So Rebecca Clark is played by Bethany Joy Lenz. I'm curious, what was it about Bethany that you felt like would make her perfect for this part?
I'll tell you what I told her before she signed on. She read the script. She really enjoyed it, and then they arranged for a Zoom meeting between me and her. And the first thing I told her is that, and I had worked with her before. I had written a Christmas movie for her called Five Star Christmas
Yeah.
on Hallmark. What really struck me about her character and her sort of what she brings to it is that when you look at her, you just see this intelligence behind the eyes. I mean, she just looks, you know, and in real life, has that intelligence, but also you get the sense of perseverance and grit from her. Someone who is determined to, get from point A from point B, or from just sort of make it through life. And that's what was, and I know, she's written books and she has, her own real life backstory that I think help sort of that she brings into the series. So those are the I think the real qualities, the sort of the intelligence, the grit, the perseverance that you see in her. That she doesn't look she looks like she's lived a life and she's kind of wise to me.
Mhm. I would agree. I hadn't even thought about, she knows this story in her own life. And so to be able to portray that, that's pretty
Yeah, and that's
exciting.
what she told me. And that's what she told me when we met. And it just comes across, I think,
Yeah.
on screen.
So we meet our Mountie, Constable Alexander Vaughn, and immediately there's tension. It kind of reminded me of when Nathan Grant shows up in season six and he's kind of like the outcast. So he's not just creating tension between the prospectors and the ranchers, but even Rebecca. So talk about bringing in a Mountie who feels like an outsider.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting for me with that character is I wanted to create a character, because presumably Amani could have signed up already in his 30s, right? Because this is a brand new organization, but I wanted the brand new police organization, to be represented in our series by a young guy too. So, and bring him into this world where they have not known law up till now. The ranchers have been their own law, and to have to, and these grizzled prospectors, and to have to establish order while being still young. I really like that dynamic of having him have to step up and assert his authority when it's like these guys, like they have to accept that he has to
Yeah.
win them over in some regard. So I really like that part of that character.
It's been fun to watch that dynamic already where he's, not sure of himself as a new Mountie, but also is committed to the job and their reaction of like, who are you? So it's been exciting
Yeah.
for us to see so far. And then of course Alfonso creates a triangle for us. So I think you're famous for these.
In some lights, maybe infamous. I'm not sure.
But you know what? It creates the tension, it creates the conflict. You've said if you're going to create a triangle, that both guys need to be likable, but they need to be distinct. So, what can you tease about what makes each of these guys, Clayton and Alexander, distinct, but still both likable?
I mean, what makes them, I think, both likable is that they both want to do what's right, and they're both sort of honorable men. I think our Mountie is more worldly, and he has a uniform, and that sometimes carries a lot of weight. Um, and he has this, he has some authority, which is also sometimes, and he uses it the right way. And they all care for the woman that they're pursuing. So that I think those are elements in his favor, and I think that Clayton is, more homegrown. He he's more artistic, and initially he wears what he feels for Olivia on his sleeve, right? So he's more vulnerable in that regard, and I think that those are often appealing characteristics.
It's going to be really fun to see how everybody lands. Oh, I tend to go for the Mountie, but hey, that's just me. So,
That's good. I mean, it's good that I was in a sound mix, and there are a number of women involved in it, and and what it was prompted by someone else. They said, okay, whose team, you know, who's on the Mountie, who's the black, and there was a
yeah,
pretty
pretty
between
split.
Clayton and Alexander. It was pretty split,
Yeah.
which is great.
Which means you've created a good triangle, right?
Yeah.
I love that the idea of having Alexander kind of journal or document his work. Can you talk about coming up with that idea? It just gives us such a good perspective on what he's learning and what he's thinking in this series.
Right now that isn't a big part of it ongoing. We
Okay.
needed I to have him do it in that episode just to create the tension and because he couldn't be telling anyone else what he's thinking because he's a loner and he's out there by himself. But so that was more of a dramatic device to sort of let the audience know that Rebecca's on his radar.
Got it. Got it. Well, it was a good drop. So hopefully it's going to be fun. Are we going to know this season, like what it is that's going on with Rebecca? Can you tease that? Are we going to know? Okay. All right. So, episode 2, we get a great moment. It's been fun to watch the dynamic between Tom and Rebecca, and even just how they have progressed over the last 2 episodes. And there's just a really fun moment where Tom is sitting eating apple pie, and it's Rebecca's apple pie, and just the way that he responds to it is just interesting to me. So, is there something symbolic there, something that we should be reading into, or is he just like apple pie?
Well, he likes Rebecca's apple pie.
That's a
It's
great way to say that.
it's yeah, it's just a connection that that they have, and that's one more level of connection that they have that he respects her and she can really cook.
She's gonna win him over with the food, right? That is great. Okay, so you are famous for this idea of the her. Do we call it the her effect? What do we call it? The her. I'm calling it the her
I
effect.
just call it, I always just say her. I mean, that's how I look at these scripts, is if it has enough of her in it.
Yeah,
That's
so we mean our humor, emotion, romance. We're already seeing dabbles of the romance. We're already seeing quite a bit of emotion going on. And then there's been these little bitty moments of humor. Will we see a particular character that you're going to really lean into to provide some of those elements of comedy?
not this season. I mean, we have some storylines that are more humorous. Uh, but right now I don't have, I have in my mind potentially a character that could come in, who can might do that in season two, who's, is who, but right now it's more in individual reactions of people, or there's some storylines that we have that can be a little bit of humor in. It's
Yeah.
because I do
Yeah.
think it's important.
Well, and
It's
I think, even when, go ahead.
go ahead.
When we compare it to like When Calls the Heart, they have swung more over the last few years more towards that comedy because that cast is just so talented across the board at the comedy, but we still have those Ned Yosts and even Florence who lean comedy. And so I was just curious, if it would be more scene comedy moments or if that there would be a particular character at some point. So,
Yeah, definitely seen this year.
all right. Okay, outside of romantic relationships, what relationships are you eager for fans to see this season?
It's the mother-daughter relationships. I think, between Rebecca and Sarah and Hattie and Olivia. I mean, both of those storylines and relationships provide a lot of emotion, which
Mhm.
I really like. I really think is really work.
So good so far. And even the conversations between Rebecca and Hattie have been really special to watch. I'm
Oh, yeah.
loving that friendship that's developing. So,
Absolutely. That is another sort of central dynamic to our series, because, these two women do are, in my mind, this sort of the DNA of what will become Hope Valley. I mean, they're the ones who start the community. Right now, the community is just those two buildings, right? And it's
mhm.
gonna, there it sort of builds, but it's just those two, and so they're central to what will become Hope Valley, and sort of their approach to solving problems, their approach to, how they react to people, I think is central to what the franchise will become.
They feel very Elizabeth Abigail like. So, and we love the two of them together. So. All
Yeah.
right. So thinking back to two memorable season ending moments that you are famous for on When Calls the Heart. Season 6, Nathan is standing in the doorway watching Lucas and Elizabeth dance and gives that puppy dog look and walks out because he's so upset, right? And then season 7, Lucas is standing off to the side and watches as Elizabeth runs into Nathan's arms. Both a bit, not jarring, but definitely shock moments like, oh, where are we going? Should fans embrace for an emotional or surprising ending this season?
Yes, and I mean, I can promise from my perspective, this season ending is my biggest one. It is the biggest, sort of most impactful wow moment that I've written so far.
Okay, we're going to hold you to it. We're so excited to see what's to come. Well, I want to remind everybody watching or listening that Hope Valley 1874, it premieres every Thursday. We get a new episode on Hallmark Plus. And there are all sorts of codes all over the place where you can actually get Hallmark Plus for half the yearly cost right now. I've got one that's still good. You could do like Stephanie 50 if you want to use that. That'll give you half off. Great series. So excited to see what's to come with Hope Valley 1874. Alfonso, thank you so much for talking to me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. Bye bye.